I still remember the shock when police dug under a quiet suburban house in Illinois during the 1970s. What they found was chilling. Dozens of young men buried in the crawl space. Behind the mask of a smiling clown lived John Wayne Gacy, one of America's most terrifying serial killers. I turn the next page of my diary and write the name. John Wayne Gacy. To his neighbors in Norwood Park, a suburb of Chicago, he seemed like an ordinary man. He worked as a contractor, threw parties, and even dressed up as a clown for children's events. He called himself Pogo the Clown. To the outside world, he looked like someone who cared about the community. But behind that painted smile lived a darkness few could imagine. Born in 1942, Gacy grew up in a strict household with an abusive father. His childhood was filled with criticism, and he struggled to find approval. Later, as a young man, he tried to create a normal life. He married, had stepchildren, and worked hard. At one point, he even managed several KFC restaurants for his father-in-law. Still, trouble followed him. In the late 1960s, Gacy was arrested in Iowa for sexually assaulting a teenage boy. He served time in prison but was released early for good behavior. Many didn't know about this past when he returned to Illinois and started a new life. He remarried, moved into a quiet house on Summerdale Avenue, and started his own contracting business. He seemed like the perfect neighbor, always ready to lend a hand, always smiling. But there were cracks in that image. Some noticed young men coming and going from his home. Others thought it strange how he often worked late at night. His second marriage ended in divorce. Still, Gacy remained active in local politics, even posing for photographs with community leaders. By the mid-1970s, Gacy had fully developed his double life. By day, he was the friendly contractor and cheerful clown. By night, he prowled Chicago streets, luring young men and boys with promises of work, money, or just a place to hang out. Many never came back. I pause here in my writing, because the contrast is so sharp it feels almost unreal. A man who made balloon animals for children was also one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The city of Chicago in the 1970s was busy, growing, and full of opportunity. But for families who lost their sons, it became a place of unanswered questions and deep fear. Gacy's home looked like any other suburban house, yet beneath it lay secrets that would shock the world. I close this section of my diary with a heavy thought. Behind the painted face of a clown lived a predator. And as I turn the next page, I know it will take me straight into the buildup, the early signs, the disappearances, and the growing suspicions that would soon point to Gacy's front door. I turn the page in my diary to the early 1970s. At first, there was nothing unusual about Gacy's life in Norwood Park. He was known as the friendly contractor, the neighbor who hosted big barbecues, the man who dressed as a clown at charity events. He seemed safe, even fun. But beneath that mask, something darker was already moving. Young men started disappearing around Chicago. They were often runaways, workers looking for odd jobs, or teenagers out late at night. Their disappearances seemed random at first, and police treated them as cases of troubled youths walking away from home. In 1972, Gacy claimed his first known victim. He later admitted he picked up a teenage boy, strangled him, and buried him beneath his house. At the time, no one suspected the cheerful man in clown makeup was hiding bodies under his own floor. I pause as I write, because this is where the pattern begins. One boy goes missing, then another, then another. Families reported them, posters went up, but leads went nowhere. For parents, it was heartbreak. For police, it was frustration. For Gacy, it was power. At first, investigators thought the missing boys were just runaways. But slowly, the number of cases began to raise questions too big to ignore. By 1975, Gacy's killings grew bolder. He lured victims with promises of construction work from his contracting business. He told them he needed extra hands for a project, offering cash, food, or alcohol. Once they entered his home, they rarely left alive. Gacy developed a sinister trick. He called it his handcuff game. He would show his victims a pair of police-style handcuffs, pretend to demonstrate a clown trick, and once the cuffs snapped shut, he revealed the key was gone. From there, the killings followed. Meanwhile, neighbors noticed things. A foul odor seeped from Gacy's house. He explained it was sewer problems or dampness. Workers complained about strange smells in the crawl space. Still, no one pushed hard enough. I stopped to underline this thought in my diary. Gacy was hiding victims in plain sight. Beneath his suburban home, shallow graves piled up. By the time he was caught, 29 bodies would be found under that crawl space. At first, it seemed like Gacy was just another odd neighbor. But then, stories from survivors and missing teens started pointing to his house, and suspicion began to circle closer. As the 1970s moved forward, Chicago saw more and more young men vanish. Parents begged for answers. Police searched but couldn't connect the dots. And Gacy smiled through it all, shaking hands at parades, laughing as Pogo the Clown. I close this section of my diary with unease, knowing the next page will dive straight into the main crime story, when the mask of the clown slipped away, and the true horror of what was hidden beneath his house was finally revealed. I turn, another page in my diary, and the walls of Gacy's suburban home begin to speak. What looked like an ordinary house on Summerdale Avenue would soon be revealed as a graveyard. Beneath the floors, in a cramped crawl space, bodies were stacked one over another, hidden in shallow graves. In the mid-1970s, young men continued to vanish. Many were last seen near bus stations or on the way to job sites. Gacy offered them work, money, or simply a ride home. Once inside his house, he played his handcuff trick. With clown-like cheer, he showed them how he could slip out of cuffs, except when he locked them, there was no escape. Gacy strangled his victims with ropes, sometimes using a tourniquet made from a stick twisted tight. Some were buried under the crawl space, others in his yard, and a few were dumped in nearby rivers. Still, his smiling mask fooled everyone. He hosted parties, entertained children as Pogo the Clown, and even posed for photos with politicians. At first, nobody imagined the friendly clown was hiding bodies at home. But one strange smell and a missing boy would change everything. In December 1978, the case broke open. A 15-year-old boy named Robert Peast disappeared after telling his mother he was going to see a man about a job. That man was John Wayne Gacy. Police traced the lead back to Gacy's house. When officers entered, they noticed the foul odor immediately. They also found suspicious items, handcuffs, a rope, and a smell that seemed impossible to ignore. They began surveillance, watching Gacy's movements. He grew nervous, drinking heavily, and even confessing to friends that his life was over. On December 21, 1978, police searched his house thoroughly. In the crawl space, they found human remains. One discovery led to another, and soon the house revealed its truth. 29 bodies buried under the floors, with more in nearby rivers. I pause my writing here, because this moment was when the mask fully came off. The cheerful clown was exposed as a killer. At first, they thought they might find a few victims, but with each dig in the crawl space, the number grew, and the horror deepened. The discoveries shocked the nation. One after another, victims were uncovered. Police worked through the freezing winter, pulling remains from the ground. Families of missing boys came forward, hoping for answers, dreading the confirmation. By the end of the investigation, Gacy confessed to killing at least 33 young men and boys. Some he couldn't even name. His calmness during confession horrified investigators. He described his methods step by step, like someone explaining routine, work. Neighbors who had once waved to him now stood in disbelief. Parents who had let their children enjoy his clown shows realized the man in makeup had been hiding unimaginable evil. The unimaginable had been uncovered, but investigators still wondered, how had Gacy managed to fool so many people for so long? And with that question, I close this part of my diary. Because the next page doesn't just tell the crime, it tells the investigation, the trial, and the shocking details that kept the world watching. I turn the page in my diary to December 1978, when the investigation into Gacy began in earnest. The disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Piest was the spark. Piest had vanished after telling his mother he was meeting a man about a job. That man was John Wayne Gacy. Police began to watch Gacy closely. At first he seemed cooperative, answering questions, smiling, even inviting officers into his home. But those officers noticed the smell, something foul drifting up from the crawl space. Gacy brushed it off, saying it was just plumbing issues. Still, suspicion was growing. Detectives dug into his background. They discovered his prior conviction for sexual assault in Iowa, a history he kept hidden from many. They also linked him to the disappearances of several other young men. Surveillance teams followed him, noting his nervous drinking, his late-night drives, and his erratic behavior. At first, investigators thought Robert Piest might just be another runaway. But as soon as they dug deeper into Gacy's life, the story began to change. On December 21st, police obtained a search warrant for Gacy's house. What they found would change the case forever. Officers opened the crawl space and uncovered human remains, bones packed into shallow graves, piled one over another. The search expanded quickly. More and more remains were recovered, each discovery confirming the scale of Gacy's crimes. In total, 29 bodies were found beneath the house. 4 others were recovered from nearby rivers. I pause here in my diary because this was the moment the public learned that their friendly neighbor, the clown who entertained children, was also one of the most prolific killers in U.S. history. At first, investigators thought they might find one victim, but with each dig, the number grew, and the horror deepened. News spread quickly. Crowds gathered outside Gacy's house, stunned and horrified. Families of missing boys rushed forward, hoping for answers, fearing the worst. The crawl space became a symbol of terror, a hidden graveyard right beneath a suburban home. Gacy was arrested and charged with multiple murders. During questioning, he admitted to some of the killings, describing how he buried victims under his house or dumped them in rivers. His calmness shocked detectives. He spoke as though he were discussing ordinary tasks. The investigation revealed years of failure. Parents had reported their sons missing. Neighbors had complained about smells. Police had even encountered Gacy before, but failed to connect the dots. The case became a lesson in how predators can hide in plain sight. The police thought the story ended with the bodies, but the trial that followed would reveal even more about Gacy's double life and the shocking details of his crimes. As I close this section of my diary, I prepare to write about the trial, the climax of the case, the defense of insanity, and the verdict that sealed Gacy's fate. I turn the next page in my diary and find myself inside the courtroom in 1980. John Wayne Gacy's trial began in Chicago, and the world was watching. The charges were staggering. 33 murders, the most in American history at the time. The evidence was overwhelming. The crawl space graves, the confessions, the belongings of victims. But Gacy's defense was strange. His lawyers argued he was insane, that his clown persona, Pogo, represented another side of him, detached from reality. They painted him as a man split in two, the friendly neighbor and the uncontrollable killer. Yet the prosecution pushed back hard. They showed how Gacy planned his crimes, how he lured victims with jobs, bought supplies, and hid evidence. This wasn't madness, it was method. At first, some jurors wondered if insanity might explain such horrors, but then chilling testimony revealed how calculated Gacy's double life really was. Survivors described the handcuff game. Police described the stench of death under the house. Forensic experts detailed how the victims were killed and buried. Piece by piece, the mask of the clown was stripped away until only the monster remained. After a 5-week trial, the jury deliberated for just 2 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts. John Wayne Gacy was sentenced to death. I underline the next chapter in my diary: Gacy's years on death row. For 14 years he lived in prison, painting portraits of clowns and still insisting he was innocent. Despite his confessions, his artwork even sold at auctions, disturbing families of victims who saw him profiting from his infamy. Appeals came and went, but the outcome never changed. By 1994, his final execution date was set. Crowds gathered outside the prison the night he was scheduled to die. Some held signs demanding justice, others celebrated, and a few protested against the death penalty. On May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Correctional Center. His final words were chilling: "Kiss my ass." Even in his last moments, he showed no remorse. The police thought the story ended with his execution. But the shocking twist was that his crimes left questions that could never be fully answered. Were there more victims still unknown? And with that, I close this section of my diary. Gacy's mask was gone, justice had been served, yet the echoes of his crimes still haunt Chicago and beyond. The next page will be my last words: the conclusion, the case status, and the question I leave behind for the audience. I close my diary with the final truth: John Wayne Gacy's case is solved. Between 1972 and 1978, he murdered at least 33 young men and boys, most of whom were buried in the crawl space under his Illinois home. In 1980, he was convicted on all counts, and in 1994, he was executed by lethal injection. His smiling clown mask was gone, but the horror he created still lingers. Even today, Gacy's name remains a symbol of evil hiding in plain sight. A man who entertained children as Pogo the Clown was also a predator who terrorized families. His crimes forced communities to question trust, justice, and how monsters can live behind the most ordinary doors. And so, my diary ends with one final thought. Though justice was served, the questions remain. Did Gacy kill only the 33 confirmed victims, or were there others still unknown? How many lives were lost while he smiled through parades and parties? What do you think? Was Gacy's double life proof that evil wears the most unexpected masks? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more haunting, true crime diaries, stories that reveal how darkness can live where we least expect it.